interesting fireside chat. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So with that, next up, we are going to discuss the topic of governance and ethic. One of the hottest topic actually around this current AI hype, as we heard multiple times during yesterday's session. So I would like to welcome online Camila as the moderator. Camila is the Chief Data and Product Officer from a company called LIBRODEPASES. I hope I spelled that correctly. So excuse me for that. And then with me, I have Katharina here as well. Thank you very much for joining, but I will leave that all up to you to address this very, very interesting topic as we noticed yesterday. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Good morning, good night. I am here in France, in Europe, or good afternoon if you're there. I'm very excited to be here with these amazing professionals of the AI industry. I'm going to introduce you in some minutes. So today we're going to discuss about governance and AI ethics, themes that are very interesting right now and things that we are all part of in part of this amazing transformation we're living regarding AI and technology. So I want to first make a brief introduction, and Katharina, it would be a pleasure if you can also tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing and contributing in this AI ecosystem.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And so my name is Katharina Koerner, and I'm currently focusing on AI governance in sense of organizational governance, as well as regulatory governance, privacy enhancing technologies, and also I'm engaged in a couple of startups, and I'm also part of the Tech Diplomacy Network, where we try to explain tech for the diplomatic community to really connect, industry and diplomats.
Thank you very much, Katharina. And Fabio, your turn, if you want to introduce a little bit about yourself.
Of course, thanks, Camila. I'm a professor of artificial intelligence at Brookes University, which is the second university of Oxford. And also I'm going to be the inaugural director of our own AI Institute and liaison with the two university network in AI here in the UK. And more about technologies, so I see myself as a researcher. So I like to work on topics like modeling uncertainty in AI, or how to provide machines with theory in mind, predicting the future for applications like autonomous driving and so on. But I'm also a member of the board of our Ethical AI Institute, so I'm very much interested in big themes of concern regulations in AI and what you should or should not do when you deploy large-scale models into the wild.
Amazing. And Ian, last but not least, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Camila. I'm Ian Eisenberg. I lead the AI governance research team at Credo AI. Credo AI is an AI governance startup, and our focus ranges from AI ethics and responsible AI, like we're talking about here, to governance, risk, and compliance relating to emerging standards and regulations. The kinds of things that I'm interested in are the emerging kind of risks and opportunities of very powerful AI systems down to kind of more traditional ML systems applied to societally impactful use cases like hiring and healthcare. Part of my work is to engage with standard setting bodies or regulatory agencies like the ones responsible for the emerging EU AI Act, or in the United States, NIST AI risk management framework. And these are ways to try to articulate the principles and standards that can apply so that we create AI in as beneficial a way as possible. So excited for this panel.
Amazing. So we are going to start with the first question, and please feel free to put your point of view so we can make an interesting debate for the audience. So first, Katharina, I'm going to start with you, and I want to know what it's for you, this term that we are talking a lot, and I think we all have like perhaps different perspectives regarding responsible AI, and how would you differentiate from standard AI practice, and if it's responsible AI consider a legal obligation or simple a best practice? What do you think about that?
Yeah, thank you for this question. So it can sometimes appear, it seems to me, that responsible AI, trustworthy AI, ethical AI is kind of a fluffy term, and different people or groups have a different understanding of those things. And I totally see that also with ethical AI, that some people see it as separate or going beyond responsible AI, which also makes sense. For me personally, and also in my research, responsible AI, trustworthy AI, ethical AI, I use it in this very same way. So it's three terms for the same thing for me personally. And we have so many international soft law approaches already for those good governance principles, which include privacy, security, accountability, explainability, non-bias, human in the loop, and those principles. So all of those international good governance principles, for example, published by the UNESCO or by the OECD, or some years ago also by the high-level expert group of the European Commission. So those principles emerged a couple of years back already, but now we also see that beyond those good governance guidelines, which are not legally binding, we also see that those principles, we can find them in existing laws already. And of course, they're also reflected in laws coming up on the horizon, for example, in the EU AI Act. But if we look at, especially about in privacy regulation, we have the same principles already covered by those privacy regulations, for example, the GDPR, when it comes to the processing of personal data by AI systems. So the GDPR also has a requirement to have transparency, non-bias, accountability. So I think that those principles that we are talking about, that there's a common understanding globally what those responsible AI principles are, and there are soft law approaches and current laws that already tackle them and cover them, and of course an upcoming regulation, which is also oriented towards ensuring that those best practice principles are really deployed already from the design stage on and all through the AI lifecycle.
Amazing. So Ian, there's something you want to add for the amazing answer that we have received from Katharina, and any perspective from your point of view?
Sure. I mean, I love Katharina's points that responsible AI in some ways kind of covers, it's a quite a holistic term. And the things that I just want to, I guess, add is responsible development of AI systems and their deployment is a culture of practice that is supported by a huge range of innovations that are happening right now. As you mentioned, there's kind of broad agreement on principles, but we're in the movement from principles to practice now. How can we move those principles to a framework of accountability and kind of standards that can provide guidance, potentially even regulations that can provide kind of enforcement opportunities? But these are still at a very high level. In the end, for AI, these responsible practices have to manifest in the actual systems that we're creating, the code. Like AI is an automated infrastructure. It is us seeding very important decisions to AI systems. That's the reason why we're pursuing them. And so to maintain kind of responsible development is to recognize that there are a huge range of decisions that we as human organizations make on a day-to-day basis that we need to encode into our AI systems. And when responsible AI was first, like that term kind of came of age, a lot of the time we were thinking about things like building fairer systems, making sure that our systems are robust to adversarial attack, that they are performant, a lot of things that are pretty natural. This has evolved over time, especially with the kind of generative AI explosion, as people recognize that AI is of potentially very large, will have very large magnitude effects in society and on organizations. And so this is where another term, AI safety, comes into the mix, where people are trying to think about how can we actually develop the evaluations and the safety harness that we can put around our AI systems that don't actually exist yet. So responsible AI is a kind of a culture, it's a practice, and is supported by tools and technologies, some of which have not been developed yet. And that's one of the goals of, for instance, regulators to plant a flag and kind of push forward responsible AI innovation moving forward so that we can have the systems that are as beneficial as possible.
Amazing. And Fabio, we would love also to have your point of view about this topic.
Yeah, I'd like to build on what Katharina here just said. My question is there really a broad agreement already on all points for discussion? Because I'm not so sure about that. I mean, if you look at the EU AI Act that you both mentioned, there seem to be still gaps. I mean, in my perspective, from my perspective, EU is the most advanced regulatory body right now, and when it comes to regulation of AI, at least so it seems. But there are still gaps even in the EU AI Act. For instance, there's a lot of emphasis on model use, but not so much on like dataset construction and training methods for these models, for instance. This has been noted by Stanford University Human Center Artificial Intelligence Center recently. And also there is nothing, I mean, not much when it comes to transparency, so model access, allowing researchers to assess and evaluate these tools. So I think the desirable criteria for fair or ethical AI are still in evolution, and I'm not sure we reach a final stable state of agreement on all these points. And I would add to these 2 points, I would add impact assessment, because I think we have recently seen pretty glaring counterexample that show that proper impact assessment is not necessarily followed before the deployment of large-scale models. So I do feel, I mean, there is still a discussion ongoing on all these points, and the big problem is, from my point of view, that different regions of the world have also different viewpoints on what kind of stance to take. And this might delay the uniform, coherent introduction of at least guidelines for responsible AI that everybody can agree to in the future.
No, perfect. And this goes perfectly to the second question, and I will continue with you, Fabio, to understand a little bit more. And I think you mentioned it a little bit, but if you want to go deeper, so do you think the current state of regulations it's satisfactory? We could say that, or what do you think about that? What things we need to take care of? We need to develop. What do you see is going to be coming like in the next year or in the next 5 years? And I know it's a little bit difficult how we are right now, but trying to give and share with the audience what we are seeing right now and how also things are going to be changing also in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. We were discussing this with Ian in a backstage recently, actually. And I mean, right now we are sort of in a Wild West. I mean, things have happened in the past 2 years, which arguably shouldn't have happened in presence of proper regulation. So, it looks like there's a long way to go. And like I said, mostly in terms of agreement between different regions and different regulators, which I know, again, I'm not a legal person, I'm a technologist, so I'm looking at things from my point of view. And from a point of view of a practitioner and a person that develops new models and proposes new ideas and so on and so forth, I see a lack of transparency and lack of proper competition in the creation of knowledge, a big problem for us as university researchers. So we feel kind of crowded out by these big powerhouses which have resources that are just unavailable to us, at least most universities, but certainly almost all research groups. And that is not good, because when you have a concentration of knowledge creation, it's even worse than situations which are concentration of power, concentration of money. So to me, it looks like the world is in a similar situation to what it was in the Gilded Age at the end of the 19th century, only it's not about oil, it's not about money, but it's about knowledge creation, which is arguably even more dangerous a situation than previously. So I think it would be highly desirable if public regulators stepped in and put some clear boundaries as to how the market of knowledge creation AI should work, and how transparently the main actors in the field should work.
So interesting, and I think that we could be like debating around this topic because I think there are so many perspectives and point of view. So I would love to hear also about you, Ian, and Katharina later to add to this Fabio, what has said to us.
Sure. So, sorry, I just wanted to lay the groundwork for the people who are hearing here. Right now, there are no substantive regulations that have passed. There's a lot of talk of different kinds of regulatory approaches, and there are some standards which are not, you do not have to adhere to standards, so they contribute to what Katharina mentioned earlier, which is soft law. The approach that was kind of put forward by the EU-AI Act, which has been in development for a number of years, is focused primarily on the different risk level of the application of the AI system. So higher risk applications have additional requirements placed on them: disclosures, impact assessments, evaluations, a risk management approach, human oversight. There are a number of different kind of requirements. At the same time, while that was being drafted, ChatGPT hit the stage. And this idea that there will be these very general purpose systems that are developed by very powerful organizations kind of changes the onus of where responsibility, potentially liability, and the actual power to make changes should lie. And so the EU-AI Act is trying to figure out ways to accommodate foundation models into its writing. At the same time, there are other areas throughout the world that are focused more on, we want more innovation. That's always this kind of trade-off because AI has many benefits. And then separate from this whole regulatory push, there's the recognition or the reality that open source systems are being developed very rapidly. They are very powerful, and following in the heels of powerful AI companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and the rest quickly. So Llama 2 generated by Meta is kind of the biggest version. And as Fabio mentioned, one of the main benefits of the open source area is that it is more easy to distribute. It allows researchers to have easy access to these models. More safety kind of research can be done, but there are many potential downsides as well. It's much harder to have any recourse for open source models from a regulatory perspective. There are potential risks that are associated that we haven't uncovered or evaluated. It's a very new industry or a new technology. And so I'm not going to put words in Fabio's mouth, but some of the things that Fabio is kind of sounds like are in the same area are like there are staged releases. There are releases specific to safety researchers or to regulators to be able to evaluate the impacts of different models. These are different ways that we can lead to greater transparency and separation of power within the overall broad spectrum from open source to highly regulated closed models. And I hope we kind of move into this area, here in a distributed kind of conference, the question is going to be, how can kind of distributed responsibility relate to AI systems that are very powerful, impactful on society, and importantly, this is probably the hardest part about any kind of governance, changing incredibly fast. Like the AI models today are very different than a year ago and will be different from the models for a year from now. But Katharina, please.
So I have to say I do not agree with you both 100%. Of course, there are many aspects where I totally agree with you, but I do not think it's a Wild West. I do think that we do have a lot of regulation already. We do maybe not have this comprehensive horizontal regulation as the EU AI is intended to be, but also even in the United States, I mean, the FTC has the pouvoir to address unfair and deceptive practices, right? And that's why the FTC also started the investigation into OpenAI's ChatGPT just a little while ago with like pages and pages and pages of questions. So, and on top of this, we also have like a very active Equal Employment Opportunity Commission with its regulations that imposes transparency requirements on AI. And we have the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which mandates explanations for credit denials, for example, etc. And we have, as we all know, this new local law, New York City 144 or whatever, like for employment, that you have to have algorithmic auditing and have to be transparent about that. And then those new state initiatives, like in California, for example, really introducing specific laws for targeting AI, which of course is down the line. But I just wanted to stress that we have regulation that addresses AI. And with the GDPR, I mean, there's so many AI systems that process personal data. It's all covered by the GDPR. So, and we have one privacy law after the other popping up in the United States in lack of this federal approach. But I don't know how many there are by now, like 5, 6, 7, 10. I mean, there's no end of privacy laws in sight, and they're all applying to AI as well. So I think that's a very important point. But I do absolutely agree that the shades, like how do we then really operationalize, for example, non-bias, or what does it even mean? And that this is the question of today, as you said, Ian, and also we discussed before. But still, I think that the common principles, like as a guiding light, there is an overlap and a consensus on them. How we will operationalize them and what it even means, and what we can really do is a really different question, because we all know there could be biased outcomes, but it's really hard to understand or even find resources how to address them. Even in this really, really good report or document by NIST towards a standardization or standard for bias or non-bias in AI systems, it's more like a description, what can contribute to bias, but not so much like, you know, how do I assess group fairness, or what are the technical means to really do that? So I think, like you said, Ian, there's this responsible AI operationalization gap, more or less.
May I just quickly respond to that? Because, yeah, I mean, you mentioned that there, and I agree, there's a lot of regulation or prospective regulation on privacy, and there's a lot of attention on bias. But I do feel there's some other aspects, like the ones that I mentioned, are not quite covered. And the proof is in the pudding, because, I mean, if these regulations had been effective, certain things that happened in the past year, they wouldn't have happened at all. So maybe it will be in a better position in a year or two, I don't know. Certainly, current regulation wasn't enough to prevent the release of very powerful models into the wild without, in my assessment, proper impact assessment, because nobody knew what the effect of releasing GPT would be at this scale. So we are just part of this giant social experiment in which these foundation models are just released into the wild, and then we'll see what happens. From my point of view, this is not a satisfactory situation. You are more into the process of how regulation is produced, and I appreciate that. I would just like that to happen just a little bit faster, because, you know, a lot of things can still go wrong while regulators agree on policy or implement policy through laws. Like I don't think we are in the satisfactory situation at all right now. And like I said, the proof is in the pudding. So we are talking about this because there was a shock that was generated by these releases, And now it feels like regulators are reacting to what happened rather than being able to preempt unwanted developments. That's at least what I feel, and some of my colleagues feel as well.
No, and I think that what is happening today in our panel, it reflects like quite how we are all like feeling and seeing and all the perspectives around these two topics about governance and ethics that I think so many things had happened in the last year regarding this technology specifically. So to start like finishing a little bit with the panel and leaving some conclusions and also ideas to all our audience today, I would love to have each of one of you. I know you have been showing your point of view and how you're feeling, but to give a message or a sentence to the audience, I would love to say and know what are like the most important things that we can do to ensure, no, of course, that AI it's going to be used responsible and in an ethical way. If there's anything you see from your perspective, or also an advice or a place or something to give to our audience regarding like these two topics that I think it's like give us a lot of things to discuss, and also to I think we can have like all the day debating regarding these two amazing topics.
Should I start, or
Yeah, go ahead, Katharina.
please go ahead, as you wish.
Okay, I'll quickly give a wrap up, which is in terms of the most important areas. I think I would put them under transparency, translation, and evaluation. So for the transparency aspect, as Fabio has, I think, brought up a number of times here, it's very important that we have access to or understand the impact of these systems, how they are built, the data that's going into them, the governance applying to the most powerful systems. And that is a pretty low barrier first step. It's like it's relatively easy for us to create transparency requirements, and it gives kind of the world the ability to interact profitably with these systems. Translation being the second, because AI is increasingly a multi-stakeholder area. It impacts every industry within organizations. It's no longer just within the machine learning team, legal, product, compliance, ethics, all of these different organizations care. And that means that the impact of these systems and the way they're built needs to be translated in a way that these different stakeholders can engage with them. And of course, one of those stakeholders are policymakers themselves. And so a lot of work needs to be done to make sure that the way these systems are actually developing is understandable to policymakers. And the final point is on evaluation. So there are many aspects of responsible deployment or governance, but evaluating your system to make sure that it's fit for purpose, that it meets some whatever needs you set out, they're operationalized appropriately, is critical. And some of the ways that evaluation needs to be applied is through increased systematization, like more fairness assessments before deployment, better monitoring, but with more powerful systems that are honestly opening up whole new use cases that have never been used before. We need novel evaluations that have not been built before. And this will be increasingly important as these systems become more powerful.
Amazing. Katharina, you want to give us your point of view?
Yes, so my point of view is like arguing that all various kinds of laws somehow do overlap in basic principles. I would, especially if I'm kind of looking forward to scaling my company, or if I'm like operating in a couple of jurisdictions, I would, learning from people I interviewed actually on the topic, of course, start with pulling together a group of people within my own company that are interested in those topics as responsible AI, from different departments, data scientists, security, product, user experience design, privacy, engineering, etc., to build a working group. Or if it's a bigger company, of course, then it would be an ethics board, and really think through specific, like which values do we want to set for a responsible AI high-level policy, and what terms do we define as important for us, and what do those terms mean for us? So for example, transparency, we used it a couple of times in this session, and it can mean different things to different people, the same as with privacy even. I mean, privacy in differential privacy is something else as privacy for a privacy legal person. So start with some high-level policy overview of responsible AI principles defined for your company with a group of people, and then maybe start with also one AI use case or machine learning use case, and think through in that group what those principles would mean in this pipeline. Also, of course, assess what AI systems or machine learning systems you even use in your company, and start with an inventory. So I think those are some first steps that you can really take. And if you're more like an entrepreneur, I found it super interesting to recently read that, of course, there are a couple of, or many startups actually addressing AI governance on a horizontal level, but also there's the chance now to develop new products that from the very onset on have like responsibility in mind, or are ethical by design. And you have a vertical product, for example, for lending, and you build it in a way that you really take care of transparency. So I think that's also could be interesting for people who want to build startups in the space.
Amazing. And Fabio, your turn to give us your conclusions.
I love what Katharina just said, because I'm also working on a couple of approaches to produce intrinsically aligned models that don't need to be validated a posteriori. So you can actually think of new ways of designing a learning model so that they're intrinsically fair, intrinsically explainable, intrinsically aligned. But more in general, I'm a big believer in democratization. So fairness is it's not just about fairness of individual models. Fairness is a problem that affects AI as a field. So as a field that is about creating knowledge, AI has a problem with fairness right now. And policymakers can do a lot to ensure equal access to resources, for instance. They can ensure transparency and bring fairness at a higher level to AI as an entire field, rather than just model by model. I'm a strong believer in this, and I hope this AI Web Summit will, and I'm pretty sure is going in exactly that direction.
Amazing, perfect. So we have talked about and debate about these very hot topics right now this year of AI. So I think it would be great if we have also questions for the audience to answer, because I think there are going to be a lot of questions right there. So if there's any question you want to do and to give to our amazing panelists today, please feel free to give us questions.
So yes, we do have many questions, but maybe we have time for one. It is, what are the key ethical considerations and challenges that arise when implementing blockchain technology and Web3 principles in decentralized systems? And how can governance frameworks address them effectively?
Wow, very complex and complete question. I don't know if Ian, Fabio, or Katharina have an answer. You want to give us, each of you, the perspective?
Sure, I'll try it.
Sorry.
Oh, no, every time Ivan, no,
Yeah,
please,
no,
Katharina.
me, no, please.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Then I will shortly address like one principle of responsible AI, which is privacy. I mean, I do see some challenges with privacy in blockchain. For example, these conflicting principles of I own my data, but I also should have the right, like I do have the right to have my data deleted, right? So this immutability of the blockchain, I don't know how it really goes along with certain data subject rights, as for example, data deletion. And I do not see that those problems have really been solved, maybe by other distributed ledger approaches, not only blockchain, but I mean, I don't know if header or hash graph you would consider blockchain. I think it's a different kind of distributed ledger. So I think there are privacy problems that I do not see yet solved.
Cool.
I would still like to give the floor over to Ian, who has a very strong, customer-facing feedback. So I would like to add that as well, please.
Sure. I'll just say that the goals of governance are different than the mechanisms of governance. So the goals here are still to make sure that, in Katharina's point, that you have a privacy preserving system that respects the data of the users. If you have AI systems, you have goals that you need to make sure as an organization that they maintain. I think there are two areas where AI is kind of interacting with these decentralized systems. One, as you need that decentralized system to have the governance mechanisms to be able to deal with these kind of complexities when they're moving forward. And AI is potentially able to help there. AI-enabled decentralized organizations is one way where you can deal with the kind of transparency and translation issues we kind of talked about before that are critical to allow many stakeholders to interact together. In kind of traditional organizations, those stakeholders come from various different backgrounds, but they're only like 3 to 10 of them, maybe the general public being another one. When you have a larger number of people, you have a harder time to both make sure everyone's on the same page, that their perspectives are brought together, and that they're collated into specific actions that you can take on a kind of accountability chain that determines whether this AI system is deployed or not. Because in the end, you do need a responsibility kind of owner within your organization, whether it's decentralized or not.
Perfect. So thank you, Katharina. Thank you, Fabio. Thank you, Ian, for sharing with all the audience all your ideas, what you're doing, and how it's going to be the next year regarding AI governance and ethics. So I leave you, Thomas, with the next panel regarding Web3.
And I want to thank you very much, all of you, of course, who have participated in the summit. Camila, thank you very much for hosting. And I would like to invite everybody, keep an eye on WowDAO. Keep an eye on any upcoming conferences, summits, workshops that we are going to put in place, because we need these kind of conversations, these kind of different viewpoints to make sure that within the DAO community, the right projects will be developed, and the teams who are hopefully getting interesting ideas and feedback from these kind of conversations will actually thrive within the framework of the DAO. So with that, again, thank you very much.